Hey everyone, my name is Sean Wang. I'm a senior developer advocate at AWS Amplify. And today I'm going to talk to you about how AWS Amplify helps you build and deploy dynamic Jamstack apps. There's a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. We're going to cover why the Jamstack for those who might not be so familiar with it, how you can get started building Jamstack sites with AWS Amplify. Then we'll go straight into the problems and confront them head on because you're likely to have a lot of questions if you're new to the Jamstack. We'll talk a little bit about how you can turn Jamstack apps dynamic, and then how we can add all the backend functionality that you might need as a front-end or mobile web developer. And finally, we'll end with some really inspiring case studies about AWS Amplify in the time of COVID. So let's talk about why Jamstack. It's not immediately obvious because it's kind of a new name for an old thing. So Jamstack is an architecture that's designed to make the web faster, more secure, and easier to scale. It builds on many of the tools and workflows developers love that bring maximum productivity. So here we're talking about all the great open source tools like React, Vue, and Svelte, but also Webpack. And it's a very web-based, dynamic JavaScript approach. Jamstack compares to the traditional stack, which is more of a sort of client and server model, where you might have a lot of moving parts on the server side. The difference here is that Jamstack decouples in order to scale and speed up. So you don't actually have a running server for the majority of your requests, and you do have a running server inside of your microservices and APIs, or serverless functions, for example, but you don't actually need a running server just to serve your landing page or your app assets. And so that's a very fundamental shift in the way that people are building their sites today. There's 5 reasons that I really enjoy about talking about the Jamstack. So the first is speed. You save on the round trip to an origin server because there is no origin server. You also make use of client-side routing to actually make the user experience faster because you're not re-downloading a lot of boilerplate like header and footer stuff. There's also some security benefits. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance to anything to do with security. But the main security angle that we're talking about here is that there's no running server, so there's no server to hack. There's a smaller attack surface, particularly when compared to older stacks like a WordPress stack for those making websites, where if you forget to upgrade your WordPress instance, you might be hacked because people and bots are constantly searching out for the /wp admin hole. There's scalability benefits as well, which is kind of the same thing. There's no hug death. That's something that's pretty common in the old days. You used to get /dotted. I guess now you get hacker newsed. And yeah, because there's no monolith, like everything scales as independent components in the new serverless paradigm, where everything's sort of managed for you and kind of auto scales. So that's pretty helpful. It also embraces version control. So this is technically not strictly part of the decoupled architecture that we talked about, but in order to do your CI/CD natively, all Jamstack providers have really embraced building from CI/CD, building from version control as a core workflow of how we do things. You also get a benefit of instant rollbacks. Because you have version control everything, you can actually, if you've pushed a mistake out into your production site, you can actually roll it back to a previous commit and deploy your infrastructure. And because everything's immutable, you have a very high certainty that your rollback will be successful. So you don't compound errors with more errors. You can also do long-lived feature branch development, and AWS Amplify has a really cool feature where you can actually password protect those things, so you can only expose it for internal development or clients that might want to see it before it goes live. Finally, it's portability. This architecture involves the least lock-in and that's why a lot of providers are embracing the Jamstack. Because static sites are supported everywhere. It's the minimal required architecture to serve as a website, and therefore it's healthier long-term as well for our customers, and that's something that we really enjoy as well. So let's explore a little bit how to get started. And this is just a quick hit. It's for those who've never seen AWS Amplify before and want to know how easy it is to get started using Amplify and using Jamstack sites on Amplify. So Amplify Console is a full stack web app hosting service. It helps you do continuous deployment from some version control like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and so on. And it was introduced only 2 years ago at this very conference. So already it's seeing quite a lot of traction, and I think it's a really simple model that is really helping a lot of front-end developers and mobile developers embrace AWS for the first time on their own without a whole separate ops team. So let's talk about the 3 steps. The first step is to connect up to your source repo. So whatever is in Git, we already went over that. There's a nuance here where you can actually use, you can set a separate branch. You can, in case you're deploying from a mono repo, Amplify has support for all of that. And these are just like really default features, which all providers have, but we tend to try to emphasize these because it really depends on what your use case is. Second is the build. We allow you to configure a build setting with a custom sort of amplify.yaml configuration file. One thing that people might not know is actually you can use a custom build image. So we give you a default build image, but for whatever reason, if your project uses some weird, unusual runtime or environment, you can just give us a Docker image, and we'll use that instead. You can also add in environment variables for your build time process. So this can go into your, for example, your Gatsby builds for your static data. So that's all pretty handy. And lastly, you deploy. And the deploy steps are automatically tracked for you, including regression control, like visual regression. So at the last step, this is not a blocking stage, but I really like that we actually show you how your site looks in various screen ports, viewports. So that's pretty helpful in case you accidentally shift a regression and it's just staring at you right in the face. You won't miss it. Okay, so 5 pro tips. The first is you can actually use it as part of incremental adoption. So you can actually migrate a WordPress site onto Amplify Console, still using WordPress under the hood, but you can use rewrites and redirects to gradually migrate portions of a site over incrementally as well. So you don't have to dump your entire old stack to use this thing. The second is you can use password protection. So particularly for internal use cases, like if you're just building internal tools, you can just slap a authentication onto the entire domain, and that's pretty handy because then you don't have to code any auth. You can also do deploy previews. Again, like we said, like if you're making a PR against your site, you can actually preview what your site's going to look like before you merge the code in, and that's a pretty handy feature as well. Fourth, we also allow you to create notifications, and I highly recommend this. So every company has, for example, like an internal Slack channel. You can create a Slack channel with your website updates, so you can actually see and get notification when there's some activity. Oftentimes, I've been surprised when like my CEO steps in to dabble something and tries to slip it under the hood. I'll know because I'm hooked up to that Slack channel. And finally, the custom build images that we talked about earlier. So those are my 5 pro tips for Amplify Console. There's definitely a lot of depth inside this simplicity. So I encourage you to get in touch with us to explore it further. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the benefits of the Jamstack, how easy it is to get started. Seems great, typical conference material. But I think if we wouldn't be honest if we also didn't discuss some of the problems that have arisen and what our approach is to solving them. So the main conversation that's been going on in 2020 has been the one with Matt Mullenweg versus the Jamstack. Matt Mullenweg, of course, is the founder of WordPress and Automatic, and we're deeply respectful of his experience and his contributions to the web. He raised quite a few points, which it's kind of the elephant in the room. We can't not talk about it. So therefore we are trying to talk about it. So he raised 3 main issues. The first is slow builds. Large Jamstack sites can take over 30 minutes to reflect the changes made, and there's no bound, there's no upper bound on the 30 minutes. It's just once you get in, it really breaks the flow. If you need to redeploy to see a change and it takes 30 minutes, it really hurts development. And this contrasts with the previous sort of server dynamically generated stack where you can redeploy a change, and because you're not regenerating thousands of pages all again, you can see the new changes reflected live in production fairly quickly. So that is one of the problems that for Matt Mullenweg it's a regression compared to what he's used to. Second is non-technical users. Jamstack sites are very much a developer trend. They encourage decoupling, which means that you're not using a single tool like a WordPress to handle your UI as well as your content. You're decoupling things, and that's why that's responsible for the rise of headless CMSs that are showing up. And then you still need a static site generator or some other form of site generator to pull that data. You have to wire it up. You have to code the UI yourself, and then you have to deploy it. It's a very code-heavy workflow, and even right down to adding content. A lot of Jamstack technologies require you to write Markdown, for example, and even Markdown can be a challenging thing for non-technical users. So that limits the population of Jamstack sites. So that is an issue. And lastly, the complexity is something that's closest to my heart, because we'll talk about this later. Jamstack requires a patchwork of services, whereas typically, for example, if like you're operating within the WordPress ecosystem, there's a lively ecosystem of plugins, and they all are configured to work with WordPress by default. So it's literally just a point and click, and they all live within the same ecosystem. So billing, accounts, security vulnerabilities are somewhat all coordinated. Whereas in Jamstack apps, they typically take advantage of the API economy, where it's different logos all over the place, and you have to sort of wire them up in a chain of dependencies. And that has been an issue. That's a pro and a con in a sense that you can pick the best, and you have more choice, but you also have more rope to shoot yourself in more room to shoot yourself in the foot in. So those are the three issues that we discussed over there. So let's talk about the solutions. The Jamstack ecosystem has come a long way, at least since I started in it 3 years ago. Every static site generator has some version of incremental builds now, so that your initial build, you might have to build those thousands of pages up front, but then the subsequent builds, you might only need to build the pages that changed. So that obviously speeds up the deploys a lot quicker. You also have live preview features, which are very exciting, and that's something that, for example, Next.js has come up with. And that basically switches the default mode of Next.js from a static rendering paradigm to a dynamic rendering paradigm during development, and which is all you need, really, because during production you can make it static if all you want. For non-technical users, there is that rise of the headless CMSs, but then you also see a rise of WYSIWYG editors that are primed for the Jamstack. So one of the fascinating companies that I'm tracking is StackBit, but there are plenty of sort of UI WYSIWYG editors for your site that integrates with your code directly. So you don't have to give this trade-off of like, okay, a super closed ecosystem that I might not have a lot of control over, or fully open but then requires a lot of code. There are middle grounds, and they are actually a pretty nice experience, and I encourage people to check those out, because I did not think that was possible before just seeing them in my face. The one that's unresolved is the complexity of dependencies, because it is true that you're combining together a lot of dependencies. Obviously, I'm here to tell you that we do have a solution, and that is AWS Amplify. And it's this idea that you do need a partner to string together all these dependencies, so you don't have to wrangle a lot of building account systems, and they all have weird holes because none of them were designed to work with each other. The solution really is that either you custom string together like a bunch of stuff, or you adopt an ecosystem that's been designed from the ground up for your usage. So I think that's a compelling idea. Obviously, it's not the only possible solution. It may not be the right solution for you. I think you should consider it though, because this is proving successful for a lot of people. So let's see how this actually works out in terms of adding the functionality that we talked about. So to install the Amplify CLI, it really is a simple NPM-based installation. We also just released a curl-based installation. So even if you're not in the JavaScript ecosystem at all, you can still use Amplify. You can just look up the curl bash command from our docs. But based on what I have on screen, it's npm install g, AWS Amplify CLI, and then you configure it by linking it up to your AWS account. So this is kind of like a parallel CLI to the existing regular AWS CLI. It kind of uses the same settings. So if, in case you're familiar with AWS already, you'll be using your same account settings as well. The usage has a very typical grammar. It's Amplify init, Amplify add category, and then Amplify push. So init starts the project, add, modifies project, and then pushes out the project for deploy. And we'll talk about the categories in a second, but basically there's a bunch of different categories. And the main one that most other categories depend on, kind of like the primary category, is authentication. For obvious reasons, basically you need to authenticate a lot of requests coming in for security reasons. So the Amplify Auth and Amplify Push sets up a pretty simple structure using AWS Cognito. And this is, by all accounts, one of the easiest ways to add authentication, especially AWS Cognito, for front-end and web developers who may not necessarily have dealt with something like this in the past. There's a lot of feature functionality packed into this Amplify Auth functions. So we can use Amazon Cognito user pools to add a lot of metadata and provide the sign up, sign in, and sign out functionality. That's a base requirement for most auth applications. You can also use federated auth for social provider information. So like Google sign in, Facebook sign in, log in with Amazon, which is always great, and sign in with Apple. I also really like the user management experience. It used to be before that you needed to write custom Lambda functions to assign users to special roles, like special user groups, like admins or editors or what have you. But now you can actually do all of this from within the newly released Amplify Admin UI console. So that's a really good experience, and it's just point and click. There's no more coding involved, and you don't have to find your way around the AWS console. Lastly, it supports multi-factor authentication with one-time passwords, QR codes, and even SMS. So all that industry standard stuff that you would naturally want in an app provided for you in one package in a way that is understood by all the other categories with no extra setup. So that's pretty compelling in my view. Okay, let's talk about storage. So file storage, this is basically what I consider the eighth wonder of the world, S3. So you can Amplify add storage. You can choose basically file storage, or you can choose data storage. Data storage uses DynamoDB. File storage uses S3, and it does the same setup as well. So it works without authentication if you wanted to, but probably you're going to want some authentication so people don't abuse your storage functionality. So again, Auth tends to work well with storage, and it also has triggers that you can possibly set up. So Amplify CLI makes it really easy to set up the storage triggers. Let's say you want to do some post-processing. If someone uploads a file, you want to run it through some verification just to make sure that let's say you're doing image resizing for images, or let's just say you're checking for unsavory content. If any users submit their content, you do need to make sure that it's safe for work. So if you want to try this out more, I have a demo up on GitHub called AmpliBox. No relation to any other any other storage company out there, but essentially it's a nice little demo of how you can set up a full stack sort of storage and authenticated solution with upload, download, list, create, update, delete, that kind of thing. And I really like it. Like it's a pretty simple API, and it's just a joy to use. And it's just like any others. Like once you have an opinionated toolkit that works smoothly with like this, all the way from like the back end to the CLI to the front end JS libraries, and they all understand each other, then you're spending a lot of less time doing that and spending a lot more time on the features. And that's something I really enjoy as well. All right, let's talk about APIs. We do want to add APIs to your project to do anything interesting. And so APIs, that's a category in itself. Again, we offer two options. We offer REST and GraphQL API categories, and it's the same workflow: Amplify add category, Amplify push to deploy to production. And there are a few versions of this. So one, we support REST with Amazon DynamoDB, and all of that is set up. So notice that APIs uses AWS Lambdas for serverless functions, and that's for your compute. But sometimes you need your compute to take advantage of logic, and then you need to create the IAM roles to wire it all up. Yeah, I mean that is some setup, and that takes some training. But Amplify does it for you, and it even has a default template that you can just kind of click through. So I really like that because it gives you minimal training, and if you can read JavaScript, you can understand what's going on inside of all these functions. And I really like that. That's a great win. So other features of REST that you might enjoy, it actually uses API Gateway under the hood. And API Gateway is a very battle-tested API Gateway. I mean, it's such a generic name that I wish I didn't have to repeat myself, but I kind of do. And yeah, like it has integrations with Amplify Auth, which we talked about, DynamoDB, and basically anything else in the AWS ecosystem that you've enabled for the function that you're working on. It also has cancelable requests. It's pretty easy to set up scheduled or cron jobs, scheduled functions to do anything sort of heartbeats or periodic stuff. We also have Lambda layer support, and that's something that we released this year. So if you need any, if you need faster deploys, or if you need to ship any custom runtimes or libraries that don't change very much, this is a way to optimize your deployments much quicker. So I really like that. Lambda layers really sort of simplify the overall story about how you deploy these things and also speed it up. So that's something I really enjoy sharing with people, because this is not intuitive when you first encounter it. Like, why do you care about layers within a serverless function? But once you understand the stack within your serverless function, you do realize that a lot of it is shared between versions. GraphQL, let's quickly touch on APIs of GraphQL. This is primarily integrated together with AWS AppSync, which is a separate service that is a GraphQL gateway and layer over DynamoDB, where it stores all your GraphQL storage data. So again, AppSync's GraphQL API, it really supports all the things that you might need: queries, mutations, and does the code generation all the way up front. The recently released Amplify Admin, which you can try out, it's a visual builder for all this stuff that we're showing on the right. Like you used to have to learn like the at rules. You have to learn. You have to manually type the fields within each model. Now you just kind of set it up within the visual editor, and it works really great. There's a bunch of directives that are usable for you, and that's really awesome as well. For example, if I wanted to add search, this is kind of what corresponds to each section, right? So like I have auth on one side, I have model, and that links to AWS AppSync. And if I want to bring in search, I can just add an extra directive, and it adds Amazon Elasticsearch for me to the model that I use. And that's a really I can't imagine a lower code version of that. That's a really useful feature. Subscriptions are also another rock star feature of AppSync, and these are live WebSocket features to all your clients, and it scales pretty well. So we have some examples on the official AWS blog showing the stress test of how it scales out to 1 million connections. So that's really just impressive. Like I don't think I will ever need it, but it's there if I want it. And finally, we have Amplify Data Store, which is an on-device replica of your remote storage, and so that enables you to do offline first and conflict resolution as well. These are hard problems, basically turning your client device, your front end browser or your mobile app into a distributed system. So you do need a lot of hard computer science about this, and the team has been working on this since last year. And then, it's working on it for 2 years, and it was released last year. The new story this year has been that selective sync was released, making it easier to sync down smaller chunks of data and authenticated chunks of data, so it patches some security issues that some people may have. Okay, and there's a lot more. There's a lot of features that I really enjoy telling people about, but these are all tooling that you would build. Again, I want to emphasize, like, these are all tooling that you would build on your own. Or you would just be manually doing without. So, for example, like code generating the types and the GraphQL statements that you might use within your project if you're using the GraphQL API category, and then needing to create all the client libraries. So what I show here on the right, literally, if I want to store data on inside of my GraphQL database, I can literally say create product, and that's something that was automatically generated. And I just say API.GraphQL, and that's my async function call to call all of that. Everything else is abstracted away from me as an application developer, and that's the way I kind of like it. Okay, and the other thing as well, which I'm amazed that Amplify also does, is that it generates, it maintains UI components for you. So this is something that I recommend for getting up and running fast. Eventually, you may wish to swap that out for your own UI components, because people really care about the look and feel, and we can't make everyone happy. But I think this is a really good default, because it automatically detects the settings that you need, that you set up for your authentication settings, and reflects it in the UI. And if you're experimenting around, this is the best way to get started. Okay, so that's the overview about Amplify as a whole. There's a CLI, there's client libraries, there's UI components. There's also the Amplify console service where we do web hosting, but also AWS Device Farm. So if you need to test on real devices, that's a service that we provide for real browser testing, and people are pretty happy with it from what I've heard. Okay, and lastly, I guess I just wanted to cover some more of the human stories because I feel like covering the capabilities are fine. Covering like the benefits of the Jamstack is fine. Covering the problems of the Jamstack, those are all good, and we've dealt with them and showed how they're all part of the integrated toolchain. If you really want to try out the Amplify approach, but it only really hits home if you can help customers solve problems in a time of need. And I think these are one of my favorite examples to talk about. One of the examples I really like is Orange Theory, where they estimated that if they were to build, Orange Theory is like a fitness app. They needed to basically pivot to remote video, and have 1 million users come over in a very short amount of time. They estimated that they would need to build a full week to build a video streaming solution on their own. Instead, they used the Amplify video plugin, which we had just released as kind of like a coincidence, and they had it up and running within an hour. And that was a very fast speed up because there was not we got rid of a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting for the Orange Theory team, so they're pretty happy. And if you want to see more, you can head over to our Amplify Days YouTube video where their technical staff actually explained and took you through their technical journey of adopting AWS Amplify. So I pretty like that. That's on YouTube. That's day 2 of AWS Amplify Days that was held this year. We'll probably do a lot more next year as well. So keep a lookout for that. Okay, the other story that I really like to tell is the Orange County story. Again, this is not a commercial entity, and this is and they were put in production in 3 weeks, and they really like how easy it was to get started with Amplify Auth, using AWS Cognito. So. Sorry, using Amazon Cognito. I mean, these are all just like real life stories, which I really like because they also help people in a time of need when there's a lot of stress and a lot of stuff going on, and they need highly scalable default components to build their apps with. And that's something that I think AWS Amplify excels at. And finally, it all comes back to AWS Amplify's mission that we really want to delight front-end web and mobile developers, making it easy for them to develop, release, and operate cloud-powered applications that have uncompromising user experience. That's why I think that the Jamstack angle that we're talking about here today and AWS Amplify are a really good fit together because the Jamstack is a sort of open source, widely accepted architecture today that really jives with all the modern development trends that developers like to use. And AWS is the opinionated backend service that helps you spin up everything that you need for modern Jamstack app. So I really like how everything comes together, and I hope and invite you to come explore it with us. There's a lot that we can build together. So yeah, there's a lot of developer love. We really only got going in 2017, 2018-ish, and things have just gone up massively since then. These are the npm packages of each of the individual components, selected ones. There are a lot more than this, but I just like seeing numbers go up and to the right, don't you? And I mean that's all the social proof I had prepared and cleared legally to say, but there's a lot more conversations to be had and a lot more work to be done. So I really invite you to come chat with us. You can try us out. And if you want to find me, I'm at Swix on Twitter. And I really hope you enjoyed it. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have regarding Jamstack and AWS Amplify. Thank you.